Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CG guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel. And this is going to be next to impossible, but today I'm going to be choosing the best and worst song from every Led Zeppelin studio album. This is sure to be, a polarizing video because I know Led Zeppelin fans are very passionate about the band. They're very protective of the band's catalog. I get it. I'm a Zeppelin fan too. I think a more appropriate choice of words here would be, favorite and least favorite from each album here, because in a lot of respects for these records, they don't have a worst song, right? I mean, Zeppelin, most of these albums are perfect. They're stacked. They're incredible. Even the worst song on these albums is, fantastic stuff. And so it's very hard to choose a worst. And so more appropriately would be least favorite, So when I say the worst or the least favorite, probably the song I'm least likely to listen to on the album, to go out of my way and listen to. And for my favorite, that would just be the one that I'm most likely to listen to over and over again on the record. But again, when it comes to a catalog as strong as Led Zeppelin's, it's very hard to pick a worst and very hard to pick a best as well. Just pick one song. But that's what I'm going to try to do here. I think it's a fun exercise. Did this with Iron Maiden. We did it with Kiss. We had a lot of fun with that. And so I'm going to try it here with Zeppelin. A very hard catalog to do this with. But, these are just my opinions, of course. Everyone's picks will differ. But that being said, let's get started. Kicking things off here with their self-titled debut album, Led Zeppelin I from 1969. My favorite song here has got to be Communication Breakdown. Jimmy Page's downstroke style was the blueprint for the Ramones sound. Black Sabbath were also heavily influenced by this song when recording Paranoid. And, speaking of Sabbath, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple were all crucial to the formative years of metal, and this whole record really helped to outline what metal would become. This was a loud, in-your-face style that really wasn't being done at that time. Probably scared a lot of parents and inspired, so many of my favorite guitarists to pick up a guitar for the first time. I think Communication Breakdown is one of the heaviest tracks on this incredible debut. Possibly Jimmy Page's finest hour on this record as well. This is a classic Jimmy Page riff here, and the band wrote the rest of the song around it. Jimmy also has, a great Yardbirds-esque guitar solo too. I wish the song maybe was a bit longer, but, aside from that, it's so full of that aggressive, raw energy that personified early Led Zeppelin. Definitely a quintessential track from their debut, and super important to, like I said, the formation of metal in the years to come. The truth is, there really is no worst song on this debut album, or for most of these records, but going with my least favorite here, I think it has to be Black Mountainside. A fine instrumental track. I really dig the more folk-inspired arrangements on here, but clocking in at just about 2 minutes long, it's not as powerful or energetic as the rest of the record. Moving on to their sophomore effort, Led Zeppelin II here. Favorite song has got to be What Is and What Should Never Be. The tempo switch is just phenomenal, and Bonzo's drumming is just so powerful every time the song picks back up again. And this is one of the best examples of how the band can transition from fast to slow and back again so seamlessly. It's one of John Paul Jones' best bass performances as well, and I love the studio version of this track to death on this record, but it's even better live, especially one from the BBC sessions. Incredible song, and I think one of my favorite examples as well of, how dark and light are reflected in the band's songwriting. Zeppelin II has no bad songs, right? I mean, again, and I have to nitpick here or else, there's not going to be a video. But if I had to pick a least favorite, it would have to be Living, Loving, Made, In fact, I like this song. It has some of the band's catchiest hooks on it. I just think it's one of the broader songs on the record, and definitely not the strongest songwriting on Zeppelin II either. Next up, of course, Zeppelin III. My favorite song from this record has got to be Since I've Been Loving You, and maybe I'm a bit biased to this track. Specifically, I love the live version from The Song Remains the Same because that was my introduction to the band, and it's easy to tell how I got hooked right away. There are no dull moments on this song, right? I mean, it is a perfect blend of blues and rock, and the studio version might just be the peak of Robert Plant's vocals, in my opinion at least. Jimmy's soloing is just hypnotic stuff, and by the end, Bonzo was beating the life out of the cymbals, and John Paul Jones, his organ is just what put things over the top for me. And, this is a definite candidate for one of the greatest blues rock songs of all time. And, hey, listen, working from 7 to 11 every night wouldn't be so bad if I could take this song with me. Least favorite on this record, I'm going to go with Hats Off to Roy Harper. Very unique tribute to Roy Harper and a very unorthodox song to close out the record. Outlandish even for Zeppelin. It's a very cool bluesy track. I dig the tremolo effect used on Plant's vocals as well. And it's definitely one of those songs that when you first hear it, your initial reaction is, well, what the heck was that? What did I just listen to? But it's a grower of a track for sure. And Zeppelin were definitely influenced by Delta blues, and so it might be strange to have this as my least favorite on the record, especially when you find out later on what my favorite Zeppelin song is in a little bit. But I just think that it sounds a little out of place as the last track on the album, and having to follow up the first 4 songs on side 2 of the record, which cast, a whole different mood. This was admittedly the hardest one for me to choose for Zeppelin IV. What is really the best song on a perfect album? And, it was hard because I wasn't really sure what to do. Do I go with Stairway? I feel like I was a little bit pressured to go with Stairway to Heaven on Zeppelin IV just because it's regarded by so many as the greatest rock song of all time. But I have to go with my gut here and say that, it's not even my favorite song on the record, personally. My personal favorite from Zeppelin IV is When the Levee Breaks. That's my favorite song from this great album here. Zeppelin putting a new and all-time classic take on an old country blues song from the 1920s, but, their version stands apart with a new riff by Jimmy Page and perhaps predominantly the drumming by John Bonham, and also really dig the sludgy sound on the harmonica and guitar solos. Gives this song a bit of a rougher vibe to it that was created by recording parts of this song at a different tempo and then slowed down. And although Robert Plant's lyrics follow a similar style to the original, I think Zeppelin really take this track and make it into their own, and I think it's a phenomenal album closer, and maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I prefer this track to, some of the other heavy hitters on this record, like Stairway or Black Dog, Rock and Roll, all the songs that receive regular radio play on Zeppelin IV. And when dealing with a perfect album like this, I really struggled to pick a worst or a least favorite, and so it just came down to the conclusion that, well, if it's not Four Sticks, then what is it? I just don't know, and I love this one too. I love Four Sticks. It has a great groove to it. I think it's the perfect road trip song. It's got that great kind of vibe and atmosphere. John Bonham literally plays with four sticks. Definitely overshadowed, though, by some of the more popular tracks on this album. It's still a great song, but if I had to choose, this is probably the least great song, and least great really isn't the best way to word it, but I think it's the appropriate way to put it, right? This is probably the least great song from what's already a 10 out of 10 record. On to Houses of the Holy here. My favorite has got to be No Quarter. And my personal favorite version of this track is probably from the Earl's Court in 1975, and I love the rendition from the song Remains the Same as well, but focusing on the studio version here from this incredible album, I think it was definitely ahead of its time. Such a unique track, it definitely does stand out from the rest of the record, and, hats off to John Paul Jones. I think he really steals this track with his amazing work on the keyboards, and Jimmy's solo has this jazzy vibe to it as well, and it has these really otherworldly lyrics too, and Tool do an incredible cover of No Quarter, definitely worth checking out, although I don't think anything comes close to the original from Houses of the Holy. Worst song on this record? I gotta go with the Crunge, I guess. It's hard to choose, but, this is definitely one of the funkiest Led Zeppelin tracks, and I know some people consider it to be their worst, but I still like it. It feels like a jam session, kind of like Led Zeppelin doing a James Brown impression. It's, a fun jam, but just not on the level as, the rest of this album, in my opinion. But that being said, Funk Zeppelin is definitely some fun, harmless stuff. Time for Physical Graffiti, and, you'd think with an album as stacked as this one that it would be difficult for me to choose a personal favorite, but this is actually the easiest one for me, because not only is In My Time of Dying my favorite song on this record, but it's my favorite Zeppelin song of all time, and the Delta Blues influence is absolutely there. This is the longest song in the Zeppelin studio catalog. I think Robert Plant's delivery here carries so much weight and emotion in his vocals, and the band is really firing on all cylinders here. Bonzo's drumming is so explosive in the mix, and I remember hearing this track for the first time and absolutely being taken aback. That opening riff from Jimmy just pulls you in right away, and from, there on out, it's such a captivating blues, gospel, hard rock infused track. The live version from the O2 in 2007, Celebration Day, is, probably my favorite performance of this song, but I think the album version is what steals Physical Graffiti for me, which is, tough up against, a track like Kashmir, right, which is a crowning achievement in its own right for the band, but I'd say Kashmir probably a close runner-up for me on this record. My personal favorite's got to be In My Time of Dying. Worst song on here is going to be Boogie with Stu. The Stu in question is the sixth Rolling Stone, unofficially Ian Stewart on piano. I think it's a really cool jam of Richie Valens' Oh My Head, with added percussion by Bonzo, recorded as an outtake from Led Zeppelin IV, and I don't mind it, but it feels like an outlier on the record. It just doesn't fit the same vibe as the rest of Physical Graffiti does, and I'm definitely in the minority that feels like there's some slight filler on this double album, and Boogie with Stu would probably be the first track I'd cut. Definitely would have saved them some time with copyright infringement issues from the Richie Valens estate, too. Next, of course, we have Presence, and this was an easy one. Favorite song is Achilles' Last Stand. John Bonham's greatest studio performance, without a doubt, for me, but really all four guys worked to make this song great, and they all bring something different to the table. Jimmy Page has several epic guitar overdubs that were all recorded in one night, one evening. John Paul Jones uses an 8-string bass with a pick for the first time, and Jones really brings a rhythmic, heavy gallop to this track as well that I dig. And then there's Robert Plant, belting it out from a wheelchair. The fact that he was still in such rough shape from the serious car accident that prevented them from touring this record and was still able to give such an incredible vocal performance here on this track is really amazing if you think about it, right? And this is definitely one of the heaviest and most unrelenting songs in the band's catalog, and, listening to this track, you have to think, it was a major influence on the new wave of British heavy metal scene that would gain more traction over the next few years. I think it's truly a Zeppelin epic in every sense of the word, and maybe the last true epic they'd ever record. Choosing a least favorite on Presence, I'm going to go with Candy Store Rock. There's a lot of really strong, underrated material from this record that doesn't get recognized. Case in point, only 2 songs from this record were ever done live by the band, but there's still a significant drop-off in quality compared to how the album starts, and some of the material on here just isn't quite up to par, and perhaps no better example than Candy Store Rock. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a fun song, maybe a little too goofy though, but it's repetitive, and I wish Jimmy's solo would have been stretched a bit longer, although it still has a nice melody. Robert Plant kind of channels his inner Elvis here, which is cool, but it's never been a favorite of mine. I think it's definitely one of the more unremarkable songs in the Zeppelin catalog. On to the polarizing In Through the Outdoor record, and my favorite song on this album has got to be Carousel Alhambra. I love how pronounced John Paul Jones is in the mix of this track, and he really is prominent on the whole record, right? With lesser contributions from Page and Bonzo, Jones gets a real chance to shine on In Through the Outdoor, and it really leaves you with, wondering with what could have been for Zeppelin in the 80s, as Jones would no doubt have taken a more prominent lead with the rise of synth-infused music. And, just like this whole album, Carousel Alhambra is a bit divisive, but I love it, really. It's really interesting to hear Jimmy Page's guitar take a backseat to John Paul Jones' synth work, and this track is another 10-minute song, and really a tale of 2 different parts. The first half is fast-paced, great showcase for Jones, whereas the second half slows things down a bit with some of Robert Plant's more introspective lyrics on the album, and also highlighting Page's playing on his Gibson double-necked guitar, and things pick up again by the end. It's definitely easy to get lost in this song for sure, and, definitely gave me a newfound appreciation for John Paul Jones, who, in my opinion, is the MVP of this record. And for someone who's a key member of a major band like Led Zeppelin, the dude never got half the credit I feel he deserves. Worst on this record, it's got to be Hot Dog. The band's pastiche of rockabilly, and it's not a bad song, not really. It's fun for sure, but is it top shelf Led Zeppelin or even anything close to that? Not at all. The song is meant to be more tongue-in-cheek, but it just doesn't sound or feel like Led Zeppelin, whereas every other time the band have branched out into trying something different, they managed to make it into their own seamlessly. Maybe it would have been a better fit on Coda, I'm not sure. Last but not least, here we have Coda, somehow more polarizing than Godfather Coda, but, personally, I don't mind it, right? I think it's kind of cool, and I'm talking about Zeppelin Coda, not the Godfather. But anyway, the best song on here for me has got to be Ozone Baby, one of the 3 leftover tracks from the Into the Outdoor sessions, and, I really don't consider any of the previously unreleased studio outtakes from Coda to be top-shelf Led Zeppelin, although I still enjoy it, but I like Ozone Baby a lot. It's a fun, up-tempo track, love the bass line, Robert's screaming during the bridge is pretty great as well, and on a thrown-together compilation of, whatever the band had left in their vault, this one always stood out to me. Worst for me on Coda is going to be Walter's Walk. I just never really took to this track, recorded during the Houses of the Holy sessions. Just a pretty boring, uneventful song in my opinion, one of Jimmy's least interesting riffs, and the song gets stretched out too long. Needless to say, it didn't make Houses of the Holy for a reason. So that wraps up this video here, taking a look at my favorite and least favorite, best or worst, whatever you want to call it, songs from every Led Zeppelin studio album from their debut all the way through Coda. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel down below, turn on the bell for notifications so you don't miss a new upload. I'd love to do more of these. It's fun to look at these albums in different lights like this. We did this exercise with Kiss, we did it with Iron Maiden, and now doing it with Zeppelin, and hopefully I don't cause a riot in the comment section with some of my picks, but I definitely want to hear from you guys. What are some of your favorite and least favorite Zeppelin songs? Let me know down below. And until next time, it's the CD guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.